Hello, I'm Bill Bullard with RCAF USA, the voice of the independent cattle producer in the United States of America. So what do you do when you spend over 20 years trying to convince Congress that the cattle market is systemically broken and decisive steps must be taken before the industry forever changes into something we no longer recognize? And then for 20 years, Congress ignores you, and then suddenly begins to hold hearings, and then announces before any action is taken that it's going to hold yet another hearing. So what do? Well, you say thank you. And that's what we did this week to the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on the Judiciary Subcommittee on Antitrust, Commercial, and Administrative Law. This week they're holding a hearing titled Reviving Competition, Part 5, Addressing the Effects of Economic Concentration on America's Food Supply. So we said thank you in our written testimony submitted to the subcommittee, and then we proceeded to tell Congress that they're late to the party, that the nation's food security interest is now in jeopardy because of the ongoing dismantling of the cattle industry's critical competitive infrastructure. That is, its participants, its feedlots, and its cow herd. And because America's cattle farmers and ranchers are suffering a loss of equity each day the cattle market remains dysfunctional. And this is depriving America's rural economy of the economic strength and vitality that only can be restored by a widely disaggregated and robustly competitive cattle industry, which we're losing fast. We said that because of Congress's unresponsiveness to the red flags raised long ago, as 43% of our beef cattle operations, 75% of our farmer feedlots, and millions of mother cows have all disappeared from our industry, now Congress must enact a temporary stopgap measure to preserve what's left of our shrinking industry. And here's what we said. We explained that during the 8-year period from 2007 through 2014, the dominant beef packers purchased cattle for 64% of the weekly average wholesale beef value. Now, the average wholesale beef value during that period was $172 per hundredweight, and 64% of that was $110 per hundredweight, which was the average steer price during that entire period. And we said that during the 2007 to 2014 period, cow-calf producers and cattle feeders were suffering under a severe economic cost-price squeeze, with the average return for feeding cattle a negative $26 per head per month, and returns to bred cows for cow-calf producers a negative $598 per bred cow. Now, this is all data we obtained from U.S. Department of Agriculture reports. And our point was this. We didn't wake up a year or two ago and suddenly discover the cattle market was non-competitive. No, it's been non-competitive for decades, as evidenced by its failure to persistently return the cost of production to America's cattle farmers and ranchers. But then we pointed out that whatever market power the beef packers exerted prior to 2015 worsened considerably after 2015. Since 2015 and through 2021, the beef packers used their enhanced market power to purchase cattle at only 55% of the average weekly wholesale value. Now, this resulted in monthly losses to cattle feeders jumping to an average loss of $69 per head per month, which is more than twice the losses they experienced from 2007 through 2014. And the negative per head loss to America's cow-calf producers jumped to a negative $683 per bred cow when both operating costs and total farm and ranch costs were included. We said what was a chronically dysfunctional market for decades is now an acutely dysfunctional market, and an emergency stopgap measure is something Congress needs to enact. We explained that if the broken market in 2021 would have still required the packers to pay producers 64% of the average wholesale beef value, then the average price of fed cattle would have been $173 per hundredweight that year instead of the $123 that producers actually received. And if the price had been at $173 per hundredweight, then producers would have put an additional $650 in their pocket for every head of fat cattle sold. And this, we said, would help mitigate the severe and persistent economic cost price squeeze until Congress sees fit to enact comprehensive market reforms. And in terms of long-term solution, that of actually restoring competition to the cattle market, we pointed out that the only comprehensive market structure reforms introduced so far in Congress that would accomplish that is the bill introduced by Senator Cory Booker in the Senate and Representative Rocana in the House. That's Senate Bill 3285 and the House Bill 6250. Now, we support them both. So please go to our website at r-cafusa.com to read our testimony and to join with us so together we can permanently fix our severely broken cattle market. Congress needs to act, but will only do so if most of America's cattle producers ask them to. So let's do that. Thank you and have a productive week.